How would you feel if someone measured your value solely by the clothes you wore? For one veiled executive, that very question reshaped his entire perspective. The dealership's glass doors swung wide as a quietly determined man entered, dressed in a humble polo and threadbare jeans, an image so ordinary he might have been mistaken for a middle-class buyer scouting a modest vehicle. Little did anyone suspect that this man, Elijah Daniels, was the very CEO steering an entire chain of showrooms. He hadn't come for a flashbulb frenzy or a routine management audit. Instead, he had chosen to vanish into the crowd, determined to witness firsthand the treatment meted out to customers at one of his flagship locations in Austin, Texas. Elijah's triumph hadn't been granted on a silver platter. He'd forged his empire stone by stone, fueled by relentless determination and a steadfast commitment to honor. Yet he knew that even the grandest structures could hide fissures, and today he was set on uncovering every hidden crack. As his eyes roamed the brightly lit showroom, sales staff hustled past in animated chatter with impeccably dressed patrons, while no one paused to greet him. In truth, Elijah welcomed the anonymity. He craved an experience stripped of pretense. A practical gray sedan caught his attention, a no-nonsense, reliable model standing in stark contrast to the glitzy vehicles he typically commanded. A faint smile tugged at his lips. Today, he was simply Elijah, not the revered CEO. But as he neared the counter to complete the paperwork, a disturbance from behind snagged his focus. Two customers had sparked a conversation that tightened his stomach with unease. Their words, far from idle banter, dripped with bias, ignorance, and an unmistakable air of entitlement. They had no inkling that the subject of their disparaging comments stood just a few feet away. Yet Elijah held his tongue, listening intently before choosing his next step. No stranger to hushed whispers and covert prejudices, Elijah recalled his upbringing in Birmingham, Alabama, where early lessons taught him that success was never simply handed out. His parents, both educators, had labored to imbue him with resilience and fairness, virtues that carried him through decades of relentless effort, eventually transforming him into a self-made multimillionaire and one of the nation's most esteemed business minds. Despite his accomplishments, Elijah couldn't help but acknowledge that the world hadn't evolved as much as he'd hoped. He often replayed quiet confessions from customers, employees, even friends, tales of subtle slights, unspoken judgments, and the sting of being treated based on assumptions rather than reality. That very disquiet had drawn him here today. He no longer trusted second-hand reports or polished memos. He needed to see the raw truth unfolding at the front lines of his enterprise. Stripping away the emblems of success, the sharp suits, the glint of luxury watches, even the custom ride that usually ferried him to boardrooms, he parked his modest rental a block away, intent on immersing himself in the genuine rhythm of an ordinary customer's life. Stepping into the dealership stirred a nostalgic ache. It recalled the early days when he'd hustled from lot to lot, selling cars on commission by listening intently to each customer's needs. Back then, it was all about forging trust rather than hitting sales quotas. Yet now, as he gazed at the sleek, polished expanse of the showroom, Elijah couldn't help but wonder if that foundational trust had been supplanted by something altogether different. Immediately, his eyes caught the sight of a cluster of salespeople lingering near the front desk, their glances skimming right past him in favor of a sharply dressed couple admiring a luxury SUV. Elijah merely shrugged. It wasn't about preferential treatment, he was there to unearth the truth. And as truth often does, it made its presence known when least expected. Elijah drifted toward rows of gleaming automobiles, their surfaces mirroring the harsh glow of fluorescent lights overhead. In a secluded corner, the modest gray sedan, its unassuming design blending effortlessly with its surroundings, sat waiting. It was far from flashy, but that was precisely its allure. It embodied the everyday experience of a buyer who wasn't there to flaunt wealth or stir a scene. A young salesman stole a fleeting glance in his direction before swiftly redirecting his attention to a sharply dressed man engrossed with a convertible. Elijah paused, feigning interest in the sedan while his mind absorbed the unfolding dynamics. The air pulsed with fragmented conversations, slick sales pitches, the rhythmic whir of printers ejecting contracts, and the occasional burst of laughter from a cluster of employees huddled near the coffee machine. It wasn't long before Elijah discerned the unmistakable hierarchy at play. The sales team lavished attention on those who seemed primed to spend lavishly, while buyers like him, dressed casually, were largely overlooked unless they explicitly sought assistance. This stark divide clashed violently with the values upon which Elijah had built his business. Every patron, regardless of appearance or purchase, deserved equal respect. At last, a salesperson, a young woman in her 20s with an overly practiced smile, approached him, her tone polite yet curiously hollow as she inquired about his needs. Elijah responded in a measured, casual tone, stating his desire to purchase the sedan. Their interaction was curt and transactional, no artful upselling, no probing questions into his true needs, and no attempt at forging a genuine connection. As the salesperson retreated to process his paperwork, Elijah's attention drifted back to the murmur of voices behind him. There, a man and a woman stood just a few feet away, whispering in tones soft enough yet carrying enough heft to be unmistakable. Initially, their chatter sounded trivial, but something in their cadence pricked his attention. "She probably can't even afford it," the man remarked with a derisive smirk. "Bet they'll run her credit and she'll be out the door in 5 minutes," he added. The woman let out a light laugh, adding, "You know how it is, some people just love to put on a show." At that, Elijah's heart constricted. He'd first assumed they were speaking about someone else, but the furtive glances directed his way made it clear, they were targeting him. Their words weren't mere rudeness, they were woven with assumptions about his identity and his supposed financial limits. Yet, for a moment, Elijah chose silence, allowing each venomous syllable to settle before determining his next course. Standing still, his gaze remained locked on the gray sedan before him, even as his ears absorbed every sneering remark from behind. The man's tone exuded a casual arrogance, a self-assured jeer born of never having to question his own worth. "People like that always aim low," he chuckled. "Probably doesn't even know what a down payment is." The woman's voice dripped with faint concern. "Oh, don't be so harsh. Maybe he's been saving up for years to buy something decent, though I seriously doubt it." Elijah's fingers curled tightly around himself as his calm veneer wavered under the weight of their words. It wasn't anger that stung him, they weren't questioning his ability to afford the car. What pained him was the deeper dismissal, the notion that one's worth could be gauged solely by outward appearance. He scanned the bustling showroom, wondering if anyone else had caught the undercurrent of bias, but the staff remained preoccupied and other customers absorbed in their own dealings. It was a stark reminder of how easily such moments of prejudice slipped by unnoticed, dismissed as trivial even as they spoke volumes about the hidden biases simmering beneath the surface. Then, the woman leaned in closer to the man, whispering something that Elijah couldn't decipher, and they both erupted into a shared laugh. His pulse raced, a silent tempest gathering within him. Part of him yearned to whirl around and demand an explanation, while another part hesitated, questioning whether such confrontation would change anything or merely reinforce their narrow prejudices. Drawing in a deep, steadying breath, he reminded himself why he had come, not for personal vindication, but to gain a deeper understanding. He was there to observe his business through the unvarnished eyes of everyday customers, and now he was witnessing the raw, unsettling truth. Yet the heavy silence within him would not permit him to simply walk away without addressing what he'd overheard. With measured, deliberate steps, Elijah turned slowly. In that instant, the man and woman froze mid-sentence, their smiles faltering and replaced by uncertain, half-hearted smirks, caught between embarrassment and defensiveness. "Excuse me," Elijah interjected, his voice calm yet laden with undeniable gravity. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. Were you discussing me?" Startled, the man blinked, stammering, "Oh, no, it was just casual talk, you know." Meanwhile, the woman fidgeted with the strap of her purse, her composure slipping as she added, "We didn't mean any harm, it was merely a bit of banter." Stepping closer, Elijah maintained his steady tone. "I find it curious how such jokes always come at another's expense. Do you often make assumptions like that, or is today an exception?" The man's face flushed as he sputtered, "Look, buddy, we didn't mean any harm. You're taking this all the wrong way." Elijah's gaze remained unyielding. "No harm was intended, but tell me, what would you think if someone were to judge you solely by your appearance? If snap decisions were made about your character or worth, would you consider that harmless?" In that moment, the dealership fell conspicuously quiet. A few employees and customers had paused, drawn into the gravity of the exchange. The atmosphere grew thick, as if the weight of the moment pressed upon every listener. The woman attempted a dismissive laugh. "We were just talking, no need to make a mountain out of a molehill." Elijah's expression softened slightly, yet his words remained measured and deliberate. "It's not merely a minor matter for me, it's significant for every person you casually dismiss without knowing their story. You have no inkling of who I am, what I've endured, or what I'm capable of. In truth, every individual merits respect, whether they're buying a simple sedan or a flashy sports car." The man shifted uncomfortably, murmuring, "Fine, we're sorry. Can't we just leave it at that?" Elijah nodded slowly. "Apologies are a start, but the real question remains, will you do better next time? That's what truly counts. With that, the pair awkwardly retreated, leaving Elijah to return to the counter, his heart pounding as adrenaline began to catch up with him. Public confrontations were never his preference, yet sometimes silence simply wasn't an option. Even as he finalized the paperwork for the sedan, he sensed a subtle transformation in the dealership's air. Where once the staff had seemed indifferent to his presence, now some glanced his way with curious interest, while others betrayed fleeting hints of embarrassment, as though wondering what they had overlooked. Elijah didn't need to announce who he was, his words had already resonated powerfully. The young woman processing his sale now spoke with a noticeably softer tone. "Thank you for your patience, sir. Your car will be ready shortly." Elijah offered a polite smile in return. He wasn't there to single anyone out, but it was evident that the ripple of the confrontation was beginning to spread. Employees whispered among themselves, and even the manager had emerged from his office, surveying the floor as if trying to piece together the day's events. Once the transaction was complete, Elijah requested a private word with the manager. A middle-aged professional with a well-rehearsed smile quickly approached. "Is there something I can help you with, sir?" he asked. Gesturing for a quiet corner, Elijah began, "I'd like to discuss my experience here today." Without divulging his true identity at first, he recounted his observations, the indifferent sales staff, the overheard conversation, and the crucial need for an environment that honored every customer with genuine dignity. The manager listened intently, nodding along. "Thank you for your feedback," he replied. "We will take your concerns very seriously." A small, knowing smile tugged at Elijah's lips. "I hope so. You see, I'm not merely a customer, I'm Elijah Daniels, the CEO of this company." At this revelation, the manager's face drained of color. "Mr. Daniels? I had no idea you were here," he stammered. "That's precisely my point," Elijah responded evenly. "I came here incognito to gauge our performance. While there are many points of pride, there is also considerable room for improvement." He raised no voice nor issued any ultimatums. Instead, he shared parts of his own journey, how he had built the company on bedrock principles of respect and fairness, and how essential it was for every employee to embody those values. By the end of their conversation, the manager wasn't simply nodding out of politeness, he was genuinely listening. As Elijah strode out to his new car, he noticed the earlier man and woman lingering near the parking lot, now avoiding eye contact. Their discomfort needed no further words, it spoke volumes that his message had struck home. Yet Elijah understood that the true measure of change wasn't confined to one confrontation, it lay in the everyday choices that followed. Driving away in his modest sedan, Elijah replayed the day's events over and over in his mind. He couldn't shake the thought of how effortlessly people allowed biases to dictate their treatment of others. It wasn't solely the biting remarks of those two customers, it was also the subtle indifference of some staff and the dismissive treatment reserved for those who didn't conform to a specific image. It was a sobering reminder of how far society still had to travel before everyone was met with genuine respect and dignity. Elijah believed in accountability, but he also believed in growth. He hadn't sought to humiliate the customers or the manager, his intent was simply to illuminate the mirror that sometimes people needed to see the impact of their actions. As the highway unfurled before him like an endless ribbon under a vast sky, a quiet resolve took root in Elijah. He wasn't merely managing a business, he was sculpting a culture. A culture where individuals, regardless of whether they fit society's narrow expectations, could step into a dealership, or any place, and be accorded the respect they deserved. The lesson was unmistakable, ignoring bias or hoping it will vanish on its own is not enough. Real change demands active intervention, whether it's speaking up, implementing new policies, or simply treating others with the same kindness and dignity one would expect for oneself. Every small step, he realized, is part of a far larger journey. Before pulling into his driveway, Elijah recorded a brief voice memo for his executive team. "We need to overhaul our customer service training. Make it personal. I want every employee to understand that everyone who walks through our doors should feel valued, regardless of appearance or purchase choice." With that, he sent the message and allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Although the day had been uncomfortable and, at times, frustrating, it was undeniably worthwhile. He had seen the hidden fractures in his foundation and now had the chance to mend them. So next time someone steps into one of his dealerships, whether dressed in a suit or a t-shirt, they'll leave with more than just a car, they'll depart knowing they were seen, heard, and respected. And perhaps, just perhaps, those two customers will pause to reconsider before casting judgment on someone else. In stories like Elijah's, we glimpse the transformative power of awareness, empathy, and steadfast leadership, and the promise that change, no matter how small, begins with a single honest conversation.